brain drain on the coast, and how you kind of counter that with pockets of the state where maybe it's not so good to get people here.
Brain drain, that starts off with the music. I'm Glenn East. Let me try without it. Can you hear the back? Glenn East, Gulfport School District. I told Mr. Wilder that I have not called the Biloxi superintendent, and I have not called the police department when I cross the Biloxi line. As you're aware, Biloxi is our biggest rivalry in just about everything. So if I start looking out the window, you'll know I'm worried about Indians showing up. Let's talk about education on the coast. There's 11 school districts on the coast. I think that you will find in those 11 school districts very outstanding education. I think that we do a great job on the coast preparing kids for IHL work in institutions of higher learning. I also think we do a pretty good job of preparing children for being productive members of society. I think that you will notice that the conversation on the coast, especially in Gulfport, began to shift about 8 years ago when we began to look at career pathways, trying to prepare students for the world of work, and trying to make sure that when a child left us, they knew what they wanted to be when they grew up. That did not work that way. They do know what they do not want to be when they leave us, so they're able to narrow their choices as they go off to our IHLs and begin work. So as far as the quality of education on the coast, I think if you look at the state MDE required results, you've got some of the strongest school districts in our state here on the coast based on those. But more importantly, I think if you were to call each of the school districts high schools and ask where our children are attending college, we do send students all over this country. That may help with brain drain, or they may also keep them here. So one of the things that we are known for on the coast in all 11 of our districts is the fact that we send children to probably just about every state in the union to go to the IHL world. So as far as the quality on the coast, I think we're strong. I think that we are getting better in the career and technical world and making sure that they understand there are a lot of jobs in the world today. And pardon my Millsaps College graduate saying this, it's really hard for me to say, but a lot of jobs in the world today that do not require that college diploma. And we also are getting away from the concept that you have to leave K-12 and go immediately into college. A lot of students are leaving high school, going into the world of work, going to community college later on, then maybe matriculating to a 4-year school. So the old day of you start in pre-K and you come out at 21 with a college degree or 23 with a master's, I think that's changing for a lot of our kids. I think they're really looking at what they want to do for the rest of their lives, what they can have fun doing for the rest of their lives, and what they can do to make sure they can rear a family appropriately for the rest of their lives. Okay. Your turn, sir.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending tonight. My name is Ashley Edwards. I'm the president and CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council, and unlike my partners here, I actually don't work in education every day, and so I would approach this question from more of an economic perspective, which is really what my day job and life is involved in. Anita, I think it's a great question. It's an important question, and let me just start by saying there's contrasting information out there about whether or not we have brain drain in Mississippi. There have been reports released that say that's not really an issue, it's overblown. And I'm here to tell you we do have brain drain in Mississippi. There's no doubt about it. I've done quite a bit of research on this specific topic. I've looked at the statistics. When we look at the areas that we compare ourselves to, the other regions of the Southeast and even the U.S. as a whole, and we look at our high school attainment levels, the interesting thing about it is we're actually right on par with some of the most successful regions of the U.S. We have about 88–89% of our population that has a high school diploma or equivalent. But when we go over and look at folks that have a bachelor's degree or better, that then drops to about 20% of our population, which is roughly half of what we see in other economically successful markets, Atlanta, Nashville, Austin, Texas, places like this. And so, it really brings the question back of is the brain drain occurring ultimately because a lot of our residents here in the coastal region have to go somewhere else in many cases to get a 4-year education if they decide to pursue that path, and then the question of whether they decide to come back after they've done that. Now, there are a lot of factors and variables that go into that. It's job availability, it's economic strength and health, it's proximity to family, loved ones. I mean, all of these things go into it. But I will tell you this, and I think this is maybe one of the most important things to consider. Our economy is changing. It's changing in front of our eyes in a way that is dramatic. We're reaching a tipping point. When you look at our job environment, our career readiness environment, if we look back to 1985, the number of manufacturing jobs in the United States since 1985 has been cut in half. But the number of jobs of people working in manufacturing with a master's degree or better has doubled. So I think Superintendent is correct. We've believed for a long time in Mississippi, and rightly so, that not every kid has to go and have a college education. There are great technical programs in our high schools that can make people ready for careers. However, what we're also seeing in terms of the regions that are the most economically successful is that they've got populations where they've got more talent. They're retaining more of that talent, and they're putting more of that talent into a college path such that they can be prepared for the sort of the jobs of the future, the jobs of the evolving economy. And so I wonder how sustainable we can be if we don't start to switch strategies at some point to say the requirements even of entry-level jobs and traditionally technical industries are starting to change. And the need for a college education, whether it be at the junior college level, at the 4-year college level, or even an advanced degree, is becoming much more normalized than it once was. And when we look 10 to 20 years in the future, with automation and the things that are going to come with technological advances, there will be fewer jobs in traditional industries, and those fewer jobs are going to require a higher level of skills to access. And if we're not on the front cusp in Mississippi of preparing ourselves for what the world is going to look like in 10 years, then we're already behind economically. And we see regions that are doing that, and I would not give us a passing grade, pardon the pun there, I wouldn't give us a passing grade on whether or not we have fully evolved as a state from a policy level, from a holistic level of the way that we approach education, as the way we approach workforce training and development, to say that we're quite at that point yet. But there are a lot of great strides being made. There's a lot of efforts to try to get people in pipelines and pathways to get into certain careers. Our community colleges have done a tremendous job of really being the leaders in that way. And we need to see more of that continued evolution, because what worked for us 20 years ago in terms of preparing our workforce for jobs is not going to work for us 20 years from now. The world is changing too quickly, and the demands of the market are changing too quickly. And so it's something that's incumbent upon all of us to solve, because our economic future really depends on it.
Thank you, Anita. Ladd Taylor, Vice President of the Perkinston Campus in George County Center at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, and it is also for me an honor to be here. I'll piggyback on the economic development aspect. What's one of the first things that a family or a business coming into a community is going to look at? They're going to look at the stability of the local schools and colleges in the area, and they're going to look at the infrastructure of those schools. Superintendent East mentioned the 11 school districts, and it's our priority to make sure we've got an outstanding relationship with each one of the 21 high schools, both public and private in the state, in our 4-county district, because if we want economic development in our local communities to flourish, we've got to maintain a positive working relationship with our high schools in the district. And Gulfport High is a great example. I was telling someone earlier, if there is a pilot program that we want to try, Glenn is going to be on board and ready to go with that if he thinks it's a good idea. So we've really developed some great things coming out of Gulfport High. One of the things that we've got to do is make sure, and like Mr. Reese said, is, seeing that pendulum shift to, hey, not everybody's cut out or needs a 4-year bachelor degree. So basically, understanding that and embracing that, I think our numbers on the drain will certainly decrease because we'll be preparing our local workforce for the jobs they can get right now. We had a BP Restore Act grant that we started over at the West Harrison Center over in Long Beach that is a work-ready program center, basically making sure that we have a workforce that's strong and readily available for the needs of the jobs right here in this community. So we're very proud of that effort. But that's the key thing, is making sure for a vibrant community and economic development growth, you've got to have a strong workforce. And partnering with the high schools in our 4-county district is helping us to get that accomplished. And certainly maintaining a positive working relationship with our high schools is one of our most important priorities.
Before the next question, Nita, one of the things that Humanities Council may want to do is, we may be the wrong people to have here. I think it's time that you probably invited a senior from each high school and maybe a 20 or 25-year-old and talk about the brain drain, which it exists. We know it's there. We know in Gulfport that we'll lose more children right now, that they always seem to come back at some age, Roger, 35 or 40, but they are going to places like Austin and Atlanta and so on and so forth. But it may be a great conversation the next time you come, is to actually have a 20 to 25-year-old and a high school senior and point blank ask, are you going to stay, and why aren't you going to stay if you're not staying? Might be a great conversation to have.
Well, this is a great question for you, because having been to Gulfport High, I know they're always doing innovative things over there. It's an amazing place, truly it is. So what are some of the innovative models of instruction you all are using in Gulfport, and what have some of the outcomes been? And I have a little spin on that question for you other two.
Anita, about 10 years ago in our strategic plan, we decided the American high school was broken. How many of you remember what you did your senior year in high school other than senior English? Maybe played some athletics or in a drama class. So America moved to the 12th grade in a depression so that we could not put our 18-year-old in the workforce, but we had no place for them to be. Well, guess what? We're one of the few countries that didn't move back. And so your senior year is for most of us, unless you were taking AP classes or whatever, was a fun time. That's almost true for our junior year. So 18 years ago, we said, how can we better serve our children? How can we serve our children from poverty? How can we serve our children from the richest families we have? And what does that look like? So at Gulfport High School, we went to career pathways, as both Ashley and Brad had mentioned, as a way for children to explore what they wanted to do when they grew up. See, American kids' biggest fault right now is probably they don't know how to set goals and think about what they want to do when they grow up. And understand that at 4'5" I'm going to be a professional basketball player. That means I have to go shoot ball every day and probably go to the gym and learn how to stretch myself out. So we begin in 4th grade having those tough conversations. What do you want to be when you grow up? In our country, you can literally do just about anything that you want to do, but there's some realism that goes with that. So our 4th grade counselors have gone back to what many of your parents did for you. Set goals. I want to be a doctor. Now look at your reading score and your science score and you're hitting a D. You can be a doctor, but those scores have to come up. So you have to make sure that your science and that your reading increases if you want to be the doctor. We're not saying you can do anything you want to do. We're saying you can do what you want to do, but there's a pathway and some skills that you've got to learn before you get there. So that conversation changes for us in 6th grade, where every one of our parents come in and they're having the same conversation. Well, I want my little giant to be a preacher. What does it mean to be a preacher? You've got to learn how to speak. You've got to learn how to read and to translate. So those conversations begin in our school district, and then we begin with ACT Aspire. And so we get beat up for standardized testing and so on and so forth. That's a conversation for the other day. But ACT Aspire does 2 things for us. It predicts very accurately where you're going to end up on the ACT. So why is that important? What is the #1 tool that Southern kids have to get into a college? Their GPA doesn't matter, guys. It is an ACT score. Now, if you want the Flower Club's $1,000 scholarship, you better have a good GPA to go with it. But to get into school and perform, they're looking at the ACT. 21 on the ACT is the national average. What does that mean? That means that 50% of the kids in our country have scored lower than you, and 50% have scored more than you, so your chances of being successful in college are 50-50. In Gulfport, we're trying to have that conversation. We give the Aspire, it does another thing. It shows you interest. So that person who reads the Aspire, the interest inventory is there. I want to be a doctor, but lo and behold, your interests are in law, or in politics, or in teaching, or in preaching, or in mathematics and engineer. I'm not going to tell you you can't be a doctor, but what you're telling us on that document is you really are leaning toward being something else. What do you have to do to get there? So parents have those conversations. You hit 9th and 10th grade in Gulfport, you are fixing to experience the 2 toughest years of your life academically. And we are earning the majority of our high school credits for graduation in the 9th and 10th grade year. The taxpayers of Gulfport pay for every one of our students to take the ACT at the end of 10th grade. What does that do for you? That tells you where your ACT score is. Our goal is for you to score first a 24 and then a 27. Selfishly, why do we have a 24 and a 27? Lad, a 24 gets them into your school with half money, 27 gets them free of charge. 27 gets you to most of our IHLs in our state free of charge. We want them to understand their ACT score can help govern their future. We also, at the end of that 10th grade year, that's when they begin to kind of work in their pathways and talk about what they want to do. We have kids working all over our community, working side by side with doctors, with lawyers, with McDonald's, with wherever, learning what it means to have that skill. And we're not talking about just going there and listening. You know, it's one of our top students. She graduates this year from Alabama. She went to one of our hospitals because she wanted to be a doctor. Well, when you're watching surgery and you pass out but the blood starts flowing, that's not a very good thing to be as a doctor. Now she's graduating from Alabama. She'll be a dentist. A little more blood than that too, I guess. But anyway, the bottom line is she saw, she experienced. So all of our kids leave us experiencing and listening to those professionals say, this is what you have to do to get there. It's not just showing up. It is a conversation. The doctor is saying, what is the course in college that will keep you from being a doctor? Who knows what it is? It is organic chemistry, and it is done in the 2nd year of college. And if you make a C or less, they are discouraging you at the IHL level from going any further as a doctor. Oh my gosh, I'm crushed. I can't be a doctor. But nurse can make it. Physician's assistants can make it. How many medical records are in the medical field? All things these kids can fall back on. So that's what we're trying to teach and show. We also have the middle college, one of the first things that Gulf Coast Community College, we call it middle college, they call it the Collegiate Academy. Let's make sure we have that right. So what, has it been 2 years or 3 years, Larry?
It's been 2 years.
2 years ago, 2 years ago, we graduated 17 students who actually got their associate's degree 2 weeks before they got their high school diploma. All 17 of them ended up going to state schools, except for one military, Army, and one ended up in Kansas. Proud to report that all of them are still in school and being successful. And Mommy said, you're going to put my 18-year-old daughter as a junior in college? Yes. We got to quit selling American kids short. There are a group of children who don't want to play high school and all that stuff we did in our senior year. They want to get to the world of work. They want to have that chance to go there quicker. So right now, I think we're at 54 in 2 classes. We graduated with another 22 last year. Again, all of them are off. The one I worried about the most was the one that went to architectural school at State. She showed up as a junior. She went to her counselor. She ended up taking some sophomore, junior classes. She's being successful. So in Gulfport, we're trying to make sure that the light at the end of the tunnel is where a good, strong American kid wants to go. Our counterparts are going there. So our whole shift was, it is about the world of work. It is about the JOB. It's about being happy. It's also about the research on our millennials and Generation Z. They're going to change jobs 30 or 40 times evidently before they retire. Roger, you and I have stayed in the same business probably forever, you know what I mean? The new group's not doing that, but it's in the same field. And so making sure they understand those fields is important for us. The results coming back, yes, we're doing an outstanding job. 87% of our kids graduated. This is 4-year-old data from University of Southern Mississippi in 4 years, not 5 or 6. Auburn was 100%. So about every 3 or 4 years, these colleges send the graduation rates from school, so we must be doing something right. Do some of our kids come home from college? Sure they do. But they come home from college, maybe in IHL, go over to Gulf Coast and refocus what they want to do. 4th grade teacher said I might not be a doctor because my science score is not good. Well, I got that 27 on the ACT, but the science part was my lowest piece. I'm still going to try. Remember, in America, you can do what you want to do. It didn't work out. I didn't get to organic chemistry, and my parents spent all that money on that route, and I can say I can regroup, and a lot of them do, not a lot, but the few that do come back, go back to Gulf Coast, reorganize themselves, and head back to IHL. So it's all about the individual child and their plan for what they want to do when they grow up, and at the end of the day, everything leads to a job, and everything leads to happiness and being able to rear your family in a community. So there's a couple of high experience. The last thing we've done is, you're going to be mentioning the ship building, you're going to do that. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to see if you would take this question next, because I have a little bit different spin on it for Ashley, and I know y'all are doing some innovative things.
Well, I wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Glenn said. You know, it's a mindset. It starts with advising in that culture change of those career technical. It's more than okay now because our students getting career technical degrees oftentimes are making a lot more money, and that's just been a proven fact now than our 4-year business degree recipients and a 4-year bachelor degree in business. And that's just an example. But it takes, our counselors at Gulf Coast, working with the counselors in the high schools, making sure we're all on the same page, and even working with our with the counselors at Southern Miss, Ole Miss State, our universities, to make sure that everything we're saying is accurate and everything that the high schools are saying, matches what we're saying, and then so forth on to the university, because there is a pathway. IHL just adopted a new policy that is going to allow our career technical students to transfer up to 60 hours. You got 45 career technical hours and then 15 gen ed hours to the university to get a bachelor's degree, a career technical bachelor's degree. So that's something that the universities are realizing that pathway is the most lucrative one, or can be, for our students. And Glenn mentioned Collegiate Academy. We have a partnership, either Collegiate Academy, dual enrolled or dual credit, with almost all of our high schools in our school district. We proudly had 37 Collegiate Academy graduates last year. That's students, and it started with Gulfport, that walked across that high school stage and at the same time got their associate's degree and their high school diploma in one swoop. And Glenn told you some of the statistics about that first graduating class. We had 37 graduates last year. Right now, we've got 120 students across our 4-county district that are Collegiate Academy students, and now we're seeing the shift towards career technical. We have 5 career technical education students that are in Collegiate Academy, and we have 1 in culinary and 4 in computer coding. So we're going to see more and more career technical Collegiate Academy. And that just, like at Middle College, Collegiate Academy, call it what you want, they're graduating high school and getting their associate's degree at the same time, and that is amazing.
Let me dovetail back in, that is, what we're also learning is I'm going to go back to my little young lady who's graduating from Alabama. She had one of the highest freshman scholarships that Alabama gives, and the reason it put her over the edge is she also took LIL. So she had all these AP classes, she had all this rigorous work, but she also had LIL. We got a young man going to MIT. What put him over the edge was he spent time in CTE rolling out robotics. Great math student, speaks well, but he also had that CTE piece. So he's been able to value that at MIT. And that story is becoming more and more common as our universities are looking at their role. Because if you want to talk about university graduation rates, another topic for another day, but we're on about 34 to 45%. So we've got to make sure that once we get them there, that's not Gulfport, that's as a country. So we've got to make sure that we get them there, they know what they want to do, they're not spending time, and quite frankly, all of you parents out there, they're not wasting your money trying to find themselves. Our role in Gulfport is to help them find themselves before they get out. I'll say it again, we really aren't graduating kids who know exactly where they want to go, but they know what they don't want to be involved in, and that's helping them bear those choices and get off to college.
And I would say I've never seen a more informed group of counselors in the high school levels in our Fort County district and at the college than we've ever had. I think it's unprecedented what we're seeing right now. They may not have all the answers, but they certainly know how to obtain the answers for the students and point them in the right direction.
And our kids will tell you this, we're visited by Southern Ohio all the time right now. I mean, we're talking about probably 30 in the last 6 years. What they're most impressed with is when you ask a child on the Gulfport High School campus, what is your ACT score? They're going to tell you. They may think 32, or they may say 15. But the point is that they know that's important. And ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, they also know it's money for college. So the 4.0 with a 21 and the 3.5 with the 36, guess who's getting it? That ACT is going to drive that train.
And if you do poorly on the ACT, I mean, you come to Gulf Coast, then you turn it around, you get involved, because a lot of times, how many people test well on standardized testing? You know, I should not raise my hand because I don't. But here's the deal: if you're great in the classroom, and you do well in school, but you just didn't test well, you come to Gulf Coast, you get involved with Phi Theta Kappa, and that's another opportunity for you to get transfer scholarship dollars. And my daughter, thank goodness she was in PTK and she got scholarship money going to Southern Miss. So there's opportunities for students who do not come in on ACT scholarship.
Your turn.
Ashley, we want our kids to stay here, right?
Right.
So what kind of innovations are you seeing in education, or what kind of programs are you seeing, areas of study that are particularly helpful in this coast economy for students? And this might be a second part of the question that's kind of a totally different question, I guess, and that is you brought up artificial intelligence, and which is going to be huge, and how important that is in terms of what kids are studying and doing now.
Well, so there's a couple of interesting things. It's a good question, Anita, and I focus a lot on the way that the economy is changing, and it's striking. We have to start to look at college entrance a little bit differently now, because it used to be that we were having to train our local workforce for the local jobs that existed. But in 15 years' time, what we're going to see is, potentially upwards of 30% of our population is going to be working remotely. So you're going to have kids that are graduating as computer coders that are going to be doing contracts in the Philippines for folks that are doing, application development and various different types of technological development. And they're going to be sitting in a co-working space or in their home in Gulfport or Biloxi doing that work. And so the issue is it kind of becomes a supply and demand challenge. And that is, in many cases, we don't have the local demand for those kind of skills, the local demand for those kind of educational career pathways. But we know that they're going to be there worldwide. And so if we want to keep those folks here, the folks that are looking to get into remote work and things like that, then we need to give them the opportunity to get that education here. And then also make sure we've got all the other pieces of the puzzle, so that we have the entrepreneurial infrastructure in place when they come out of college, so they can actually stay here and be successful. That's one of the I think the big changes that's occurring. The other big change I think that's occurring that makes it so necessary to make sure we keep our best and brightest here in our region is, I have a master's degree in economic development, and when I came up through that program, we lived in a world that was still very much focused on physical capital. It was, if we're going to be successful in economic development, you have to have good roads and good interstates and sites with water and sewer and electricity, and that's the way that you win economic development. So if you have the physical capital, you get the company to come and locate and create the jobs. And in 15 years since I went through that, the world has completely shifted, and now we have a world that is completely based on the idea of human capital. No longer do the jobs go where the physical capital exists. They go where the people, where the talent is. And so we've seen this amazing shift occurring, and that's why you've seen places like Nashville, that in the early 1990s, the Wall Street Journal wrote an article saying that Nashville was going to be one of the first great American cities to go under because they couldn't retain their talent. And they had a 30-year plan to say, we've got to figure out a way to reverse this. Now, you look at last year, they were ranked #1 in the nation in economic strength rankings because of what they've done. The same is true in places like Austin, Texas, and other places. They have really focused on trying to create this collection, this sort of center of gravity of talent. And as a result, a place like Nashville, a place like Austin have led the United States in corporate relocations. The jobs are going where the talent is. And that's something we've got to embrace here, not only on the coast, which I think we probably do a better job of here, but statewide if we're going to continue to be successful and competitive. No longer can we essentially allow our best and brightest to go somewhere else to enter the workforce and to eventually enter their peak earning years and to spend their tax dollars and so forth. And there are a lot of components of that. There's a big community development component. We've got to have the things that attract these folks. We've got to have housing that's there. We've got to make sure that college is more affordable. If you're like me and you wake up every morning watching financial news networks, what you would see is that there's a lot of talk about sort of the next big recession that's likely to come, and college debt, student debt, is going to be a huge component of that because it's not affordable anymore sometimes to go through the programs that's necessary to do that. Now, again, a place that we're very competitive here locally in our state as a whole, but it's a tremendous issue, and it's going to really affect our competitiveness in the future. And so, I'm sort of, I don't mean to be preachy about it, but it's one of those things where we've got to kind of quit resting on our laurels because the playbook that we ran in 1995 is not going to work in 2025. We've got to redesign the playbook for a new economy and a new world, and it really starts with education because there's two ways you can bring talent to your area. You either create it from the inside, so your students, your population that's already here, you make sure that you matriculate them through the educational process and provide the type of talent in the workforce that's ultimately going to be competitive. Or you go and find it from somewhere else, and you create such an attractive environment they're going to relocate. Well, we know that right now the second one is not happening here. We're not seeing massive relocations of that talent to our region. And so we've got to double down on making sure that we're among the best in our region, southeastern United States, in the first one, which is making sure that we're graduating the talent that will stay here and will be able to attract those jobs that are going to follow where the talent is.
How do public schools shape economic development on the coast, and how can the business and community and the schools, and how do they work together for the benefit of both?
So the first thing that you have in pre-K-12 education right now is we're no longer about memorizing a test and things like that. It's about problem solving. It's about, and Ash made a good point, it's one of the things that we say, we're trying to rear children today in K-12 to solve problems that we don't even know exist yet. So the rhetoric that you hear about state testing and the difficulty of it and so on and so forth is truly centered around the fact that I can no longer memorize and sit down and be successful. The first thing I have to do is to be able to read. The ACT is have math, English, and science on it. But at the end of the day, it's a reading test. You can be a great student in science and go take the ACT and feel like you know no science when you leave if you can't read. So the shift is to problem solving. The shift is to understanding that what you're learning today, you have to use to apply to solve problems in the future. We're spending a great deal of time on what it means to lead and the fact that you can't, that the day of the one guy in the business being the expert is gone. It's a team approach today. Lad knows community college work. I know K-12. For him to solve K-12 work, if we to solve community college work, not going to work. We've got to be together. We've got to talk about what's best for kids. And the most important thing we're doing is we're asking students, Gulfport's dropout rate 8 years ago was 78%. We're now bouncing on that 90. Why? We asked kids why they dropped out. You need to ask kids why they're leaving Mississippi. They'll give you an answer. So for us, the answer was they didn't have a relationship with somebody on their campus. That's why we expanded these counselors that Lad's talking about. So it's about teaching children, one, to ask for help. I'm looking at some CEOs and leaders of businesses. Did you ask somebody in your organization for help today? 20 years ago, if you were the boss, you didn't do that. You said, I'm going to battle through this myself. So you're trying to teach kids when to lead and when to follow. How to solve a problem that everybody's input is important. Math, science, and social studies is still important, don't get me wrong. But how do you use those items to solve problems for the future? So that's the biggest shift in K-12.
You know, I look at it, you know, I served as an economic developer for a number of years, and I look at it from that perspective, and I can say without question that one of the single most important factors in closing an economic development deal is the quality of your local public schools. You know, there's a sort of a joke in economic development circles about the fact that, you know, you land the project by impressing the CEO, and you win the project by impressing his wife. And the first thing the wife is going to ask is not going to be, you know, what is your business climate? What are your taxes? You know, what's your franchise taxes like? They're going to say, show me the public school systems where my kids are going to go, and the employees' kids are going to go, and let me make sure it's up to par. Good news is we've done a very good job of that on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, which would also suggest that that's not the only factor involved, because certainly we have not been as economically successful as we would like to be. But it's certainly one of the factors. And the good news is it's a factor that we're already leading in. You would be hard-pressed to find a concentration of better public schools in any region of Mississippi than we have here in the 3 coastal counties. So it's a point of pride. It's a bragging point for us that we have. On the same note, you know, what we have to ensure that we can do as we continue to sort of move forward into the future is ensure that we are constantly updating our curriculum. You know, recently, you know, I read some proposals, one from Gulfport for a new STEM program. And these are the things that are really important as we go forward, because those are the things that the employers are talking about. They're looking for innovation. They're looking for cutting-edge programs in the high schools. They're looking for ways to make sure that they have selling points that are even larger than the places, in some cases, that they're moving from. And so, you know, that's, I think, super important. But again, you know, I give a lot of credit to these guys because we've done a very good job at that, and it's something that, you know, is very much near the front of our proposal in many cases, the quality of our public schools. Now, there's still room to improve. Certainly in some cities across the coast, there's more room than others. The most recent educational rankings that were released, we actually saw an uptick in some of the school districts, and some were A-rated for the first time, and really since that type of rating has been in place. But there's still room to do more, and so again, we can't rest on our laurels. We have to keep doubling down on the things that are working, try to eliminate the things that are not, and ensure that we're positioning ourselves to be as competitive as we know we can be.
If I might add to that, you know, we can foster the talents of our students and hope that they come back and start their own business in our communities, but it's going to be difficult for them to do that if they're in debt. And one of the things that we received a grant from the Hines Foundation, Woodward Hines, and to be an Achieving the Dream college. And one of the things that we identified, we really dug into the data, Dr. Chamberlain knows all about this and about what I'm about to say, is one of the things that, you know, like Glenn said, you know, talking with the students, getting their feedback. And one of the things we identified through going through that process was that our students really lacked the financial literacy that they needed right now at this time. Because right now, the student loan default rate is through the roof. And if we want our students to get through with college and be able to do what they're trained to do without having to go get a job to get, you know, just to make ends meet right now and not do what they're trained to do, then they can't be in debt to do that. So we're starting launching something, some programs, some Canvas training, and that's our online class tutorial where they can go in and get and take a module to learn about financial literacy and Dr. Chamberlain knows the default rate on loans, I mean, that's something that we don't have control over that. If a student applies for a loan, that's a federal loan. It's nothing, we can't deny that or accept that. We just have to process it, right, Dr. Chamberlain? So that default rate, even though you may know that it might be an issue for a student, there's nothing you can do about that. So what we can do is inform them on their financial literacy and make sure they understand the ramifications of that student loan.
I want to dovetail back into two things. One is the financial loans, and I will tell you that I think we're all weak at that in our state. I really believe that we need to do a better job with our 10th graders, juniors, and seniors. And the issue with the loans is too many of our children are not getting loans just to go to college.
Right.
They got their apartment, they got their special truck they had to buy, and all that's getting tied into student loans. That's wrong. And we've got to educate parents on how that works, and how the fact that you can come out of school with debts that's going to take you 20 years. So that is something that I know probably K through post-secondary we need to work on.
Yeah.
Also, we also got to make sure, and Ashley said it well, we can't live on our laurels. We added Mandarin Chinese to the Gulfport curriculum. Started off in kindergarten, and now we have it in the high school for credit. Why did we do that? Mandarin is the international language from China, and so at least those kids will have a head start in being able to have that conversation with a Chinese economy. So, French is still important. English, of course, is very important. And then Mandarin Chinese, that really helps you and then Spanish, in our local world, that gives you 4 languages that make you world or internationally competitive as you start. You've got to do some more things like that. Ashley also made a point that was very valid about us. We just built a new high school. And I think if you go look at that high school, you're going to find that the classrooms we built weren't these gigantic things that we've always had. Guys and gals, in 20 or 30 years, you may be earning your high school diploma, sitting in your bedroom at home for some of it, and then coming and putting your talents to work at the local high school, especially in those CTE classes. So the whole way we're educating ourselves, our first citizens of this country did not go to school. And Abraham Lincoln was in his farmhouse using whatever he could find for education. So in some sense, we maybe go backwards to go forwards in that. And I think that's what these things right here are doing for our children. And again, just like financial literacy, how to use these appropriately is important, because about 64% of what's on here is not accurate. And so those are things we're fortunate with. We definitely need to do a better job on financial literacy in our K-12 world in our state.
Probably for the adults too. It's where the
But,
kids are getting
the
these
way my
classes.
father raised money and made money is different than the way I need to do that. So yeah, we probably all need to do that.
And the data is incredibly compelling when you sit down and you really look at it. I mean, the number of millennials that are not buying homes because of student loan debt, the number of millennials that are walking out of college in many cases and going back to live with their parents because of student loan debt. I mean, we have in some cases, we have an entire generation of Americans that are really changing the way that spending occurs in our society, because in many cases, the money that they have is going to pay off student loan debt, as opposed to what I was doing 20 years ago when I got out of college, which was immediately wanting to buy a house and buy a car and all the things that we're not seeing happening now. And so it's definitely changed. I have a daughter in 10th grade, and I think about what I paid to go to college 20 years ago, and now I start looking at what the tuition costs are for the colleges she's interested in, and it's incredible. It's mind blowing, and and in many cases the equal problem is that you don't always have the job opportunities and the salary opportunities on the other side that can justify that kind of expense. And so we've got a model there, to both of their points, we've got a model there that is broken, and we can't, it's not sustainable. You can't go on much longer until we figure out a way as a society to address it, because there's going to have to be a giving point at some point, and either you're going to have fewer folks going to college and preparing themselves with the skills they need, or alternatively, you're going to figure out a way to make it more accessible and affordable so that we can continue to progress. But we can't continue to do it the way we're doing. We're reaching a tipping point there.
And also, I'm going to go way out of right field to go at that as well, in that students coming back to live with their parents may also end up being a positive for families in this country. So it's a double-edged sword the way I look at it. So let's look at research, and I'm really fixing to stretch myself, lad, so correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of families outside this country still have grandmother and grandfather living with them, like we did early on in our history. You know, our greatest nation, or our greatest people, you know, in World War I and World War II, many of them had an aunt or an uncle or a grandmother or a grandfather. One, because of the Depression, forced us back to it. But today, some of this going back home may in fact help us have a conversation about the American family and realize the importance of the American family in controlling spending and making sure that we're doing things economically as well. That's a real out and right field thought, but it's the truth. You have pods of families in our state that are truly going back to live together because they want to make sure everybody's taken care of. And so it's not unusual, especially in the central portion of our state, where I'm hearing where Junior and his wife come back home, Mom and Dad are there, and Grandma and Grandpa are there as well. And so the debt's being controlled, but also the value of family is being brought back. So there's really an outside the box, right field thought that is coming to fruition. Roger has his hand up. Does that mean something?
He wants to say something, ask a question.
I would like to ask a question. And this is not to diminish any of the fine things that they've been saying, but it seems that one of our issues is pre-K, getting kids started in the right manner. If you get them started, I know my wife is a retired elementary guidance counselor, and I think they would all agree that, as she did, that you can tell by the third grade whether or not they're going to make it. And it seems that it's that period of time that is so critical in how well they do, whether they do well on the ACT or not. What do we need to do to get them started, to get the kids started?
Yes, that's my world.
That's you.
So Roger, here's what we know, and we've only learned in the last 20, I think maybe we knew it, but we've only researched in the last 20 years. The brain development for reading and thinking happens from birth to really about 3 or 4 years old. And those families who encourage reading in their homes every night, who encourage storytelling in their homes, who encourage all those things that Abraham Lincoln and his family did around the fireplace in their homes, are more successful. I can tell you that you can walk our campuses, and I will guarantee you that the children it makes no difference who they are, racially, demographically, whatever. If they've got a book in their hand reading, I'm going to bet on that horse to be successful on the ACT and in college. If children are reading every day, they're going to be successful. But it starts at home. And so pre-K is important because that's just one more year where you hope you're beginning to have that happen. But training or read, and again, another value for the family, Grandma and Grandpa can read to baby when Mom and Dad have been at work all day. Grandma's job is to read that nighttime story where Mom's been at work working in 8 hours trying to make ends meet. So that's another important piece. But it starts at birth to about 3 years old. So we try to send, if you go to Memorial Hospital and have your baby, you're going to get a little G bill, but it's going to have a book in it, it's going to have a card that you fill out, that if you'll just send it in, we'll send you a book once a month that helps you get, if you'll read that book every night, before, and then get the next one and do that, you'll be amazed at how well students will grow. So it really has to do with the family and parents understanding that I've got to read and talk and allow my children to tell their stories and to be successful.
I heard somebody say that if we were going to put money into public education, we should put it in pre-K and drop the 12th grade.
I think I've already made that point with the senior years.
You did make that point. And I would echo that because I took Latin 2 in the 12th grade and know nothing about it.
But you look where you are today. You must have done something right.
It's not because I speak
It is. It's about money, but it's also about knowledge. It's about making sure we are When's the last time you took your baby to the grocery store and talked about money? I can buy this cereal for this much. Anyway, it's about always training and talking and making that part of a family's life.
Well, we don't have the parents who have those capabilities. What do we do about that, if any?
I think in K-12, we're trying hard to make it pre-K-12. We're trying to do parents, we're trying to go to home, we're trying to catch the siblings in a time where it's very difficult for us to do, no excuses intended. But we've got to re-educate or educate that you've got, when that child is born, conversation needs to begin immediately. The more you talk to children, the more you allow them to talk to you, and the more reading you do to them, the better off with them, better off they're going to be in school.
And I may be an optimistic, and I know I am, but I think I can see the change as far as parents knowing that importance of reading at a young age. Talked with Ms. Gillespie over here about a reading program that we partnered with them on. They were about to start again because we do it at our community arts center on the Ferguson campus. But I see us rolling that across the district because it's in the evenings and parents are just starving for that opportunity to come to a location to get their children started reading. And it lasts over the course of a week, and the attendance has just been, so great that, I just reached out, our librarian spoke with Caroline about starting that up again, but I just saw it, wow, this is really successful, and I see those parents getting involved, whereas, they're not just dropping their children off. One of the requirements is they need to be there as well, but they themselves were enjoying it, and I think that seed has definitely been planted, and it's just, I think the Gulfport Memorial thing is awesome, the book, and then, but things like that, things beyond K through 12 or beyond the classroom, and programs that outside of the college, even though we're sponsoring it, but it gets them, the community engaged, and those parents, those young parents involved, and they realize themselves how important reading is. But the attendance really showed us that, there's a swing there, and I think that it's pretty obvious now.
Roger, I'll just mention one quick thing, and I mean, you well remember, it's not been too long ago that we had to fight in Mississippi to offer public kindergarten. The question of whether it's going to be mandatory or not is still one of those things that's out there debated. But given what sort of this new normal is becoming, and the fact that folks are really starting to recognize the value of early childhood education, from a public policy perspective, it really begs the question: have we done enough? And is there more to do? And of course, funding is always the issue. But if it's truly the kind of priority we think it is, then the funding can work itself out. There are lots of different ways to accomplish it. So, I think there's more to come on that topic. I don't know that we're finished from a public policy perspective in Mississippi and having the conversation about how to make sure that folks have access to that early childhood education. And I would expect that that's going to be a part of the continuing political narrative as we go into the future.
One of the things that I'm looking most forward to is that Mississippi State University is going to run the Head Start programs in Gulfport and Biloxi. I don't know if you saw the news last night. They started today in Biloxi. And the model that they have put in place to do that is a partnership with the schools. And so there's the social and emotional piece that you need for those 3 and 4-year-old. Of course, they also have 3 up to 3. But there's a social and emotional piece, but there's also the chance to expand the reading and the academic piece at their level to help us out. So we're really looking forward to that in Gulfport. I know Biloxi is too, with the university and the research that they have to running this 5-year model for Head Start. So we're really looking forward to that, a major change in how Head Start looks.
That's really great news. On that note, we have a lot of university presence on the coast and some strong partnerships. But we don't have a 4-year university. Do you all think that's ever going to happen for us? Ashley and I have had discussions about how important that is for the coast. And in lieu of that, did any of you speak on some of these partnerships that are in place with the universities?
Well, I'll just, we have talked about it a lot, and I believe strongly in it. I mean, I think that University of Southern Mississippi has done some great things at their Gulf Park campus. You know, certainly our community colleges, Pearl River Community College and Gulf Coast, have both done some great things. But there's always a but at the end of that sentence, and that is, you know, the value of a comprehensive university presence is greater than simply the education it provides. It becomes kind of a point of gravitation point for knowledge, for research, for development, for economic development, for business development, for all the things that go with it. And so, while we've done a great job, I think, in providing programs, I think what we miss out on as a region, being the most populated region of Mississippi without a residential four-year university, is in addition to the educational side, it's all of the other ancillary things that come along with having being a university center. And I hope that that's something that we can continue to deal with as we go into the future. I hope I get to live to see the day. I'm not sure that I will, but certainly we've got a lot to work with. And you know, I've actually, you know, and you mentioned earlier you're going to go out on a limb. I'm going to go out on a long limb here. That's probably going to crack and break, and I'll fall off. But you know, it's interesting to see what other regions have done that have dealt with the same issues. And in some cases, they have come up with ways to invest and create their own regional private university outside of their public university system to actually serve that need and to serve that purpose. And so there's some interesting models out there. Not sure how they would all work here, but I sure would like to be a part of a group that's going to talk about it. So yeah, I'm not sure I do either. Tell Siri that I'm along the same lines. But I do think it's an issue we're going to have to solve, because to be the competitive region that we want to be, it's very difficult to do without that gravitation point, without that center of gravity that revolves around a major comprehensive four-year university. And you know, Mississippi is not necessarily unique in the sense that our major universities are in some cases located in more rural areas, maybe with the exception of a place like Hattiesburg. But certainly it is not in keeping with sort of what's happening in modern times, where universities in metropolitan areas have become major components of growth. I mean, you look, I'll give you just some examples. Look at what happened in Florida. You know, universities like Florida Atlantic University and Florida International Universities. These are universities that opened their doors in small strip malls in the 1960s, and they're now in the top 10 of the largest universities in the United States of America. I mean, so what's happened in 50 years in some of those cases is absolutely amazing. We've got a late start at the table, but I'm very hopeful that at some point we can solve that issue, or at least overcome it to such an extent that we can create a viable alternative. And part of that also comes with just making sure that we're geographically positioning things, that we're creating. You know, I love what University of Southern Mississippi is doing in terms of creating these marine technology and ocean science programs that are in downtown Gulfport. So it's, you know, I would love to see eventually almost a secondary campus there with student housing in an area like that, mixed-use development, so that you can create that, you can sort of get that that additional value of having both education and commercial districts and industry all co-located in a singular area where people can live and work and play and go and get educations in the same place. That's what it really takes, I think, to be successful in transforming communities. And so hopefully we can continue to work along those lines and get small wins over time that can add up to big transformational things that, you know, in periods of decades.
Well, I would argue that, you know, we're doing really, really good because we have the 5th largest college in the state right here on the coast, in Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. You've got the big three: Ole Miss, Southern State, Hines. We're nipping on their heels. Pre-Katrina, we were ahead of them, right? So you're right here on the coast. You've got the 5th largest of all the universities and colleges in the state, the 5th largest college in the state, right here on the coast. Our mission, we are on a mission to partner with as many institutions of higher learning that we can to make the transition to a 4-year degree or whatever their educational goals are for our students much more smoother. So I've got a laundry list of partnerships that we have here, but in the essence of time, just want to hit on a few. We've got a partnership with Mississippi State at the Jackson County campus. Everybody knows about that. You've heard about it. You may have seen, I mentioned how innovative Glenn is and everything we do with Gulfport. Dr. Keenum of Mississippi State is just as receptive to new ideas, and once we come across one that we both agree on, we hit it full speed ahead, he and Dr. Graham. So basically, we have electrical and mechanical 4-year degrees being gotten right here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and now we have industrial engineering as well. That's something we're very, very proud of, and we see that continuing to grow. We had 6 students that graduated from that program already in 2018. We're working out the details right now, going back to Mississippi State, or they're coming here, we're working out the details on that to talk about an agricultural pathway. You know, I'm responsible for the 2 rural counties in our district, George and Stone. Often we hear about students that they think they want to major in agriculture, they're not quite sure, they're certainly not confident enough to say they're going to go on up to Starkville. So what happens? They never really pursue it. What we're interested in doing is partnering with Mississippi State on an agricultural pathway. That way a student can enroll with us at our George County Center or at Parkinston and take a few classes. Go ahead and get early admittance at Mississippi State, get some scholarship dollars as they transition. So that'll give them an idea, hey, if this is something I definitely want to do, or it's not. So we're looking forward to that partnership. We also just partnered with Southern Miss on their Teacher Academy. You know, one of the things that we have a shortage on in K-12, I understand, is the teacher workforce. And this is going to be an opportunity for students to get their associate's degree, work as a teacher's assistant while they're getting their bachelor's degree. And that's something that at 18, they're going to be getting to the state retirement system. That's something we wish we all probably would have done, for sure. I know I do. And the formula's pretty simple there. Complete Collegiate Academy. That is, and you heard us talk about Collegiate Academy. That is one of the pathways in Collegiate Academy. You also heard me computer coding, but Teacher Academy is one of those pathways. They complete Collegiate Academy, they work as a teacher assistant, and then they complete a bachelor's degree while employed as a teacher assistant. So it's a really good deal. And right now we're in the process, we rolled that out, but we're going to meet with each superintendent and each high school principal to make sure that what they're hearing is the same thing as what Southern Miss is saying and what we're saying. Dr. Cochran at Southern Miss has been going with us on those visits. Met with Stone County School District the other day, and it went really well. We also have a partnership with MUW, the W up in Columbus. But anyway, we have our culinary program right here at the JD campus. So students can roll right into a 4-year culinary degree right here at the Jefferson Davis campus in Gulfport. So basically, that's a really good deal. And we just had an agreement signing with the W that allows for up to 90 semester hours to transfer into a program, a baccalaureate program at the W. So that's something that they're really extending out and saying, okay, well, we'll accept up to 90 hours, and that's huge for our students. And we also have a partnership with Faulkner University that allows up to 68 hours, and we've seen a lot of our employees, a lot of our students that will stay a little bit longer with us and transfer those hours over to Faulkner so they can get, several different degree options, business administration, human resource management, and criminal justice, and so on. So if there is an idea that can be had that will lend itself to us partnering with the university, we're going to be calling them and talking to them about that. And we've been very fortunate to be able to work with Dr. Keenum, and he's very receptive to those ideas. And hopefully, soon we'll be able to fly the Mississippi State flag over the George County Center. And if that's successful, we'll launch it at Parkinston as well. But a lot of good things happening with those partnerships, and we're very proud of. Just like we foster a strong partnership with our school districts in our 4-county district, it's just as important for us to have partnerships to bring those 4-year opportunities right here to the coast. And the more we can have, the merrier. The stronger our workforce is going to be, and the more options we have for our students to stay right here locally.
There's no doubt if you could go back and redo the vote that put Ole Miss in Oxford by one vote, and it was on the coast, that the coast probably would be more like a UCLA and LSU or something like that at this point. I think what you've heard from LAD, and I think what you'll hear from K-12 is we got some pretty strong partnerships we've developed over the years. And so because of Dr. Graham and her thinking and the strategic planning that they've done, we've tried to make this very seamless because we didn't have a 4-year university here. And so we've got a lot of things that are happening now that we being K-12 and community college and also the IHL are really doing a pathway. I can only speak for Gulfport on this, but we have a large number of students who will start off at Gulf Coast or Pearl River, mostly Gulf Coast, trying to make sure, and you said it yourself, that, they were ready to go off to the 4-year school. And we do have some that matriculate and end up with 4-year degree or even a master's. But I also will tell you this, we got a lot of kids that leave this Gulf Coast and go to USA first. And so that's the 45-minute to 55-minute trek to a 4-year college. Southern, we send most of our kids to. State depends on the year. Ole Miss depends on the year. It seems like they come in different ways. We'll send 50 to State one year, and then we'll send 50 to Ole Miss the next. Southern seems to stay pretty steady. But USA, another 4-year university, 45, 55 minutes from here, is draining Mississippi kids. So I have to applaud the work of our forefathers in K-12 and the community college and the colleges for putting these things together. Think about it, you can be an electrical engineer and not leave the Gulf Coast. That wasn't heard of. And my father was working on electrical engineer for Laurel, Mississippi and Starkville. That's powerful. And of course, Ingalls likes that kind of stuff. And our businesses here, they're homegrown folks. But with a 4-year university help us, I'll say it again, we've got a lot of kids going off to USA every year and doing that piece. But right now, the partnerships we have are really filling the need.
And the partnership with the state, the engineering at the Jackson County, that's gonna diminish that number that's going to South Alabama. Engineering.
Well, and let me just mention, I mean, there are other models out there, and, another possible model that you have for things like that is, creation of a university center in a place, in an underserved major metro area of a state like Mississippi, where you can have co-locations of Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Southern Miss, so that programs that are available in those locations can be brought about here. And maybe that's the evolution.
I think that's what Ladd and them have laid the groundwork for.
Right.
It is working with those institutions,
Right.
all of them. Jackson State's got some great computer work. Alcorn's got, so just having those centers where you have options
Right.
for our students.
Well, it's really encouraging to hear how the community college system has evolved, because that's one thing about Mississippi, for me, is that we for so long had such a strong community college system, and I'm a product of, we called it junior college back then. But I went to Meridian Junior College, and I didn't have the same opportunities you're talking about to stay there a little longer and get more toward a bachelor's degree. But it's great to hear that's happening. And this is a really good discussion. And I'm sure some of y'all want to jump in with questions. We wouldn't leave time for that. So feel free, please, to jump in and ask some questions at this point if y'all want to.
Not everybody wants.
Come on, we've got Glenn East here and Ashley, and Ashley's great on brain drain, so I can see you want to ask a question there, so what? No? Okay.
So let's spur on some conversation before
Well-
we talk to. Let me tell you something.
Okay.
The leadership in education, the community college, the 11 of us, and really the 6 counties, we're all progressively trying to figure out how to help our kids. So anything that we hear, anything we can do to make sure we can grow children, and remember now, that's from poverty to the richest. And we've got to make sure we have pathways for all people. Now I'll shut up.
You talked about this a little while ago, but you made the statement, something to the effect that we're teaching kids today to do something that we don't even know what they're going to be doing or how it's going to be. Obviously, thinking for themselves is important. What else? How else do you teach kids who are facing an unknown in their workforce? How do you go about teaching them to prepare for that?
Go right ahead, sir.
Well, one of the things, everything I say, I know Dr. Chamberlain, she knows all too well what I'm going to say. She's a colleague of mine in college, but one of the things that we identified, we're going through our SACS accreditation right now. And one of the things you have to do at SACS COC accreditation is you have to have an enhancement plan, a quality enhancement plan, a QEP plan. And what we've identified by talking with our students and talking with local industry, business and industry, is one of the things, 3 things rather, that our students need coming out right now is those essential skills. Those skills that, yeah, they gotta have that degree to get in the door, but the degree's not gonna get them fired. What might get them fired is those last essential skills: punctuality, how to speak professionally, being on time, all of those things, dress code, just those essential skills are key. And we're launching, through our QEP plan, a training in essential skills. It's, listening, speaking, all the things that are in attendance. All of those things are important once you get the job. Because once you get the job, you might not really know what to expect in the job, but if you've got those essential skills down pat, you can really weather the storm, whatever may come your way.
I have a question, and this might be more towards you actually. Because I noticed that we have a lot of unskilled labor jobs on the coast. Tourism jobs, and I mean not all tourism jobs, but some
Right.
in the restaurant industry,
Sure.
waiters, all that stuff. So I know a lot of my friends. I went to USA, and I was a journalism major, and I mean I know my first year in journalism I had to work 2 jobs to pay student loans down. So is there something being done to bring more like skilled labor type jobs here to the coast, as opposed to like, I know that we've got a lot, in Madison,
Right.
but is there something being done to do that?
Well, look, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of what our sort of biggest challenge is. And it goes back to that issue of the jobs follow the talent. No longer can you just say, we'll land the jobs and hope the talent shows up. Now the jobs where the talent is. And so when you look at our economic and labor data, what you see is although we have been relatively flat in terms of overall employment on the coast over time, what's changing within that total employment is the job makeup, the career makeup. And we're seeing tremendous increases in the number of very low-paying jobs, and we're seeing corresponding decreases in the number of high-paying jobs. And so, another place that becomes evident, when you look at what we looked like on the Mississippi Gulf Coast just before Hurricane Katrina hit, 2004, we were around about $4,000 below the national household median income, which was really competitive. We were much higher than other places in Mississippi. Fast forward now to 2019, and we're like $18,000 below the national median household income, and that number is projected to be at like $25,000 in the next 5 or 6 years. And so we're losing ground in terms of that. And that's very difficult from an economic development perspective, because as we're trying to attract those higher paying, higher skilled jobs, what they see is a workforce that's not evolving in the right direction. Now, does that mean we don't have talented people here? No. What it means is it goes back to this brain drain issue. In many cases, the best and brightest are graduating from Gulfport School District or from Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. They're going somewhere to get their bachelor's, their master's, their doctorate, and then they're going and finding those employment opportunities somewhere else. And so, that again is why it's so important to have these, I call them sort of centers of gravity, but it's the things that brings that talent to an area. And there are a number of different ways to do that. I mean, Austin wouldn't be Austin if it wasn't for the University of Texas. Nashville wouldn't be Nashville if it wasn't for Vanderbilt and Belmont, all the great higher education they have there. And so universities are such a major component of that. We don't have that here, but we're trying to figure out a way to supplement it through what these guys are doing. And so, I think we've made tremendous strides, but there's still a long way to go to be as competitive as we'd like to be. And what we're most interested in, in terms of the job I go and do every day, is trying to figure out how to create a sustainable economy. And a sustainable economy means that we have to be creating jobs, a diversity of jobs, a diversity of occupations, those at the low end, those at the high end. Right now, unfortunately, what we're doing is we're seeing a lot of jobs at the lower end created and not many at all at the high end. In fact, we're actually hemorrhaging or losing jobs at that higher end. So that's what we want to turn around. And the other thing that happens from a population vulnerability standpoint is those at the lower end will also be some of the first ones that are replaced by things like automation. It's one thing when you've got to have a shift of 4 workers, performing a certain task, that you can take a robot that can do it 24 hours a day without rest, without pay to do it. And that's a reality that we're seeing, and it's happening. And as that happens, there's going to be even more demand for the scientists, the engineers, the computer programmers. That are going to be the ones that keep that equipment running and operational. And those are the things we have to make sure we're preparing for, because that future is upon us. It's here. And You know, it's only gonna continue to increase as time goes on.
So I'm going to answer your question directly, just specifically about Gulfport High. Do not underestimate the power of this robotics program that our schools are using on the coast. Greatest problem-solving tool every year. It's a new project every year. They're having to use their brains to solve problems. I think if you really look at them close, they're actually solving things that may end up at NASA, that may end up at somewhere as we explore Mars. But they're thinking, they're having to think through it. There's a bunch of oyster baskets out here in the Sound that Gulfport High kids designed and how to rotate them. There is a project that went through MIT on how to get a wheelchair safely onto a boat and have that person safe. Those are the problems that we're asking kids to solve and find important solutions for. So what you're trying to do is yes, William Shakespeare is still important, don't get me wrong, but having them in the world of learning that this problem exists and I go solve it. And the teacher is not up there solving the problem. The beauty of robotics is Brawley, who is a very smart guy, retired Air Force, knows robotics back and forth, but he doesn't sit up there and say, this is what you do. You learn by failure. We learned to put men on the moon, and we lost guys doing it because we failed. So that problem solving is with us every single day in those programs. And so never underestimate that robotics piece. Never underestimate this concept of STEM and the Fab Labs that they're doing in Jackson County. Those are powerful things that are teaching children to think. Also help us out. Yes, there's a whole bunch of different ways to solve math problems. But for a long time, we said there's only one way to do it. And the mathematicians at Stennis will tell you, what we're trying to teach children and how to solve problems is much better in the long run than 2 times 2 is 4, just because 2 times 2 is 4. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do you use that to solve problems or the conversation? Quite frankly, we've been getting beat up about that for the last 10 or so years because we had a Hancock Bank card that had 2 times 2 is 4 and you memorized it. Well, today we're asking, what does it mean 2 times 2 is 4? So it comes and it goes right into the problem solving mode.
Yes, in terms of the brain drain, and you touched on aspects of this as well, but is there any thought that the workforce collectively benefits by having the perspective of living somewhere else and then coming back, or is the chances of, you know, the majority, or, you know, of the chances of coming back are so slim that you have to
That's the
counter
problem.
it as much as possible?
You know, what we've seen in the last 10 years is that in many cases, they go and then eventually make their way back, but as economic opportunities continue to shift, there's a chance that we'll never see them again, and that's the difficulty. I mean, you know, the only reason, well, not the only reason, but one of the main driving reasons that folks would come back is because they weren't able to go and find those economic opportunities somewhere else, and that's not always going to be the case because we see that areas. I mean, you know, there's a tremendous book out right now that I really like, and it's by an economist from the University of California. His name is Enrico Moretti, and it's called The New Geography of Jobs. And he defines this changing landscape of jobs by what he calls the knowledge centers. And he talks about the way that the knowledge centers are outpacing all other areas, and the data is compelling. When you look at what he calls the knowledge centers, and what he really means in cases is places with high R&D activities, places with great educational systems, and places with you know, high levels of higher education offerings and things of that nature. And so, you know, what he says, and we'll see if he's right over time, what he essentially says is, you know, we're going to have 2 Americas. We're going to have the knowledge centers that are going to be the sort of the new centers of commerce and economic growth, and then we're going to have everyone else. And you know, if that is the case, then we certainly want to be in the first group, and that's a big challenge that we have to overcome as we continue to see this change. And you know, I will say, you know, one of the things that we saw for years throughout the 80s and the 90s, I mean, starting in the 60s, we had this huge sort of drain of people leaving the city centers around America and going out to the suburbs. And the suburbs became the places for great schools and new economic development. And in the last 10 years, what we've seen is this amazing historic shift where people are leaving rural areas and leaving the suburbs and starting to flock back into the city centers. And so that kind of goes to that issue of these knowledge centers. And Again, we want to position ourselves as one of those knowledge centers. And the great thing, from a good news standpoint, is we could be one of the most affordable ones in the country. We could be one of the most affordable places to do that. And so that's a selling point that I think that we could be really high on, but it's going to take continued work in that direction. And a whole lot of folks in partnership pulling in the same direction: the educational side, the business side, the private sector, the nonprofits, the government, the elected officials. We've all got to be pulling in the same direction with a common goal. And so I think that's kind of the big thing we've got to attain, is we've all got to have that shared vision of where we want to go. Until you know where you want to go, it's really hard to figure out how to get there.
And you better get some 20 or 30-year-olds in here and ask them why.
Right.
Like, look, take a teacher. I got one that moved to Nashville, Tennessee. Why she moved to Nashville, Tennessee? Good job. Same type kid she's working with here in Gulfport. Look at all the things she gets to do between 20 and 30 years old in Nashville, Tennessee.
Good salary.
And so those are things that but you better get some 20 to 30-year-olds in here and ask them point blank, why are you leaving? Christina, let me answer this question also from your perspective. And this is the hard part for us, because Ashley's talking about the facts. They're leaving. But we also have to do something so when a kid walks off the stage, they want to stay here. And that goes to this Harrison County initiative we're working on. It's the Eagle Shipbuilding School is the first piece. So how many of you called the plumber lately? How easy was it to find one? And I know that's not a college job. But I'm looking at you, I'm seeing these heads going, yeah. And I had to wait 3 days before they started pumping that stuff out of my house. The point is so here's what we're trying to do with the Harrison County and the Gaston Point College and Career Center, again, working with Gulf Coast. You got 37 kids working on Ingalls shipbuilding. What's that mean? That's pipe fitting, that's welding, that's some sheet metal. That's stuff that our port needs, Ingalls needs, the shipyards on the Seaway need. So you walk across the stage, you've had a year interview with Ingalls type people, Port of Gulfport type people, the shipyards on the Seaway, that year. Those kids walk across and walk into a job that most college graduates will have to get to eventually. Get there, but the point is they're making money, they can rear their families, and they're here on our Gulf Coast. When's the last time you had a house built? Brandon Elliott does a great job building houses in Gulfport, Mississippi. But you know what his biggest complaint is? He can't find somebody that can frame. He can't find somebody to run electricity. He can't find somebody to pour the concrete. We all know who they are. You're going to call Tiger Masonry because they do a great job in Gulfport, Mississippi. But his list is a mile long. So in that program, our seniors will go in, and every contractor on the coast gets to interview those guys every day while they build maybe a habitat house somewhere. And they'll see who comes to work on time, they'll see who has the energy, and so on and so forth. So you have electricity to the house, you have electricity in the house, you have plumbing, and yes, this is a small group of people that we've got to keep here as well. So we have the big brain drain with the college and the professional type, but we also have that drain or lack of the guys and gals that we need to just make life great. So those are some things that you'll start hearing out of Gaston Point, through Gulf Coast, through all the Harrison County high schools, as we begin to try to make sure they leave trained, they have those soft skills we talked about earlier. And here's the conversation is so great. Just because you're in the program doesn't mean you get the job. That every day you're late to that program, they're marking it down. Every day you're stuck on the job and you're messing with your buddy next to you, they're marking it down. It's a year-long interview about what we have to have to make life successful.
Let me just make one point on the back end of that, because I think it some of it supports what you said, and that's, going back to that book I mentioned by Enrico Moretti. One of the most compelling things that he says about these jobs that are created in the knowledge economy is that for every one new job created in that knowledge economy, there are 5 support sector jobs that are also created to go with it. So it's that multiplier effect. And so, that's, people will say things like, well, actually, why are you so worried about creating these top level jobs? And we've got, welders that are coming out that are making great money, and pipe fitters that are coming out and making great money. And the answer is, well, we need those folks, but we also need the plumbers, and we need folks that are going to do gardeners, and we need the service sector jobs that are higher paying. And so in those knowledge economies, for every one new job they create at that top level, they create 5 jobs in the service level, and those jobs generally pay much more than they pay in other places. And so that's really where you get that sort of multiplier effect throughout your economy. And that's sort of the most powerful point he makes, which is, if you want to serve everybody throughout your population, you create those jobs at the top end, and you really do get that trickle down that ensures that you have those opportunities for everybody. And that's how you create a sustainable economy. And that's what we see happening in some of these regions that we want to try to emulate.
And we, Gulf Coast, we take great pride in being flexible enough when a unique company has a requirement for training, our need for training, to adjust to make sure that we can accommodate them. And Glenn mentioned Ingalls. We trained over 2,500 Ingalls employees annually, and we partnered with over 59 local companies to train around 16,000 workers on the Gulf Coast annually. So we're very proud of our workforce training. Actually, lead the state in workforce training.
That's amazing. So thank you all for coming tonight, and I'm glad you're here, and this has been a great discussion. I've learned a lot tonight.